Hey guys, it's Iz, and welcome back to another Genshin Impact lore video. Now it seems that in my last video I didn't really explain myself too well, and honestly after rewatching it again, I can see that myself. So in this video, I wanted to expound more on that theory of whether Yae Miko is the previous Electro Archon or not. So just to be clear with everyone, there are many spoilers ahead since I am going to be grabbing information from many of the quests, items, and locations in Inazuma. If it isn't your cup of tea to be spoiled, then click off the video right now. So why don't we get started on what makes people convinced that Yae is actually the previous Electro Archon? The first thing that people point to is that Yae looks a lot like the 1,000-armed 100-eyed god statue. And that's actually fair. Her hair does look similar, and both the statue and Yae are wearing necklaces. And usually if the hairstyle of a character and statue are similar, then it must be pertaining to them. But that is a false equivalency in my eyes, because the evidence that we have of that being the case is either from a statue of the Seven, or a statue that is clearly stated to depict an Archon, like Barbatus' statue in the middle of Mondstadt. So this evidence by itself doesn't stand. So maybe the next step is to find out who exactly is the 1,000-armed god, which is the second point that people like to bring up. The 1,000-armed god is most likely a reference to Kannon, which is the real-world equivalent of the 1,000-armed god, and is the Japanese equivalent to Buddha. The 100-eyed part I don't really have a reference to, but it's most likely talking about the visions being the 100 eyes, especially since they recently just tried to seize the 100th vision of the Vision Hunt Decree. So what similarities can we find with the statue in Inazuma and Kannon to first see if this connection holds up? The Vision Hunt Decree is very similar to the sword hunt that happened in 1588 by Toyotomi Hideyoshi, where he confiscated the commoners' weapons, which he later smelted and used to form a statue of Buddha. Very similar to what is happening in Inazuma, with confiscated visions to make their own statue. So the connection of the statue in-game with Kannon seems highly plausible, and it's probably the case. So what's the problem here? We have a connection of Kannon with the statue, but Yae is not really a solid connection to the statue, so if we can prove that Yae at least symbolizes Kannon, then coupled with her similar looks to the statue, then it's absolutely positively possible that Yae Miko is who is depicted in the statue. The main thing and only connections we can make is that the appearance of Yae Miko compared to the depictions of Kannon, since we barely have any information as to who exactly Yae Miko is. So, the biggest evidence is their appearance. Kannon is typically shown to have white robes, a crown that contains a depiction of her previous teacher or a halo, and from what I've heard, sometimes a necklace of a lotus. Kind of like how you would describe Yae Miko. Except there's a problem here. See, this is a common misconception when it comes to Kannon's appearance in relation to Yae Miko. The only clothes mentioned are just that. White robes. No other color ever seems to come up. Yae, on the other hand, doesn't seem to only have white robes. As a matter of fact, her color style is split 50-50 white and red, and some purple thrown here and there. The other issue is that Kannon doesn't wear a necklace, at least not one with a lotus. If anything, Kannon is usually seen holding a lotus bloom or sitting on top of one. But wait, if a lotus bloom is her symbol, then surely it must be plausible for creative liberty to put it in the middle to fit her design and aesthetic. But this is just another distinction that we have to make. Hey, it looks like a flower, so it must be a lotus. That's just like saying that, hey, it's a tree, so it must be a birch. So to say that the flower in her design is a lotus is just an association fallacy. But we can tell what flower it is just by looking closely and seeing context. Look at this close-up picture of her symbol and a picture of a lotus. And a different lotus, and a different lotus. And how about the lotus that's found in Genshin? See the problem? The symbol on Yai's chest has rounded petals and looks similar to having 5 magatamas in a circle. But if you look at the lotus, all of their petals seem to have pointed tips. Design-wise, it's unlikely that that flower is a lotus. So what flower is it then? I'm going to do it again, but this time with a different flower. See, this one looks the same, right? As well as this. And this one too. Well, those flowers are cherry blossoms, or otherwise known as sakura. So, in the end, this is more likely a reference not only to her working near the Great Sakura Tree, but also a similarly designed character in one of MiHoYo's other games, Honkai Impact 3rd, Yae Sakura. So to recap, Yae Miko is not canon since there are no exact similarities with either of them. The statue in Inazuma is indeed a reference to canon, and although Yae's hair is similar to the statue, due to the evidence usually having the statue be clearly defined as an Archon's image, the evidence isn't enough to stand on its own. So all we have from this is that Yae Miko isn't the thousand-armed god or canon in the slightest. Well, to be fair, with this though, it's still possible that she's the previous Electro Archon, even though she's not canon. So let's see what leftover evidence there is to point out such a theory. Number 1. Why does Yae Miko have her vision still? Probably because the Raiden Shogun has to respect her, right? No. There are many people who still have their vision, like Ayaka and Kojusara, so most likely she still has her vision because she was close with the Archon, just like the other two, and we know she is close with the Archon due to the livestream before with Zhongli. Number 2. Yae Publishing House was founded a long time ago since Tokiali Tales is an old book. So since Yae founded the place, she must have been around for a really long time, so probably has Archon powers. Very big problems with this point. Firstly, there's no way to tell whether Yae Publishing House was founded before or after the Cataclysm. Historical books could have been printed on the year the stories happened, just 500 years ago, or even just last year. Old stories doesn't mean an old book, but granted it has aged a fair bit with the pages scattered around the map. But in that condition, the book itself was probably just 100 years old since the pages haven't dissolved into dust yet, and that number is already very generous. But even if the publishing house is that old and Yae is way older than Baal, that doesn't mean that she has Archon levels of power. Take for example the Adepti and Liyue. They are fairly old, and since they helped during the Archon War, it's more than likely that they are also older than Baal. Yet they don't hold a candle to the power of Venti, Zhongli, or the Raiden. So basically, old doesn't equal power. And number 3. The Kamisato household is the closest to the Archon, as well as the meaning of their name. Kami being god, and Sato meaning house or household. So literally household of the god or god's home. So to address this quickly, them being the closest doesn't mean that they are physically the closest, but possibly spiritually or emotionally the closest. Which makes sense since out of the 3 commissions, they are the ones in charge of festivals, celebrations, as well as spiritual traditions. Hint, this will also tie into their name later. Now, although Kami normally means god or deity, it actually is a lot deeper than just that surface meaning. Though it is a common interpretation, such a straight translation causes misunderstanding of the term, since it also involves the phenomena or holy powers that are venerated in the Shinto religion. As a matter of fact, the word kami is also possible to be interpreted as meaning spirit, or at least having spiritual indications. So with all that in mind, Kamisato actually means the house with spiritual connections to the divine, much like a church or a mosque. So it's more than likely that the Kamisato clan are closest to the shogun due to their connections to the spiritual or divine. And the final nail in the coffin for me is what we learn in the Sacred Sakura Cleansing, when Kazari, the embodiment of the memories of the Kitsune Saigu, when she says that she noticed a similar power in the Grand Narukami Shrine to that of the Kitsune Saigu, which seems to imply that Yae Miko is at least related to the Kitsune Saigu. And it's a lot safer to make this assumption since there are other Kitsunes still roaming around in Inazuma, namely one who is the fox-eared general of the resistance, Goro. So, assuming that Yae Miko is related to the Kitsune Saigu, there are two possibilities. One is if the Lady Saigu is the descendant of Yae, or the other way around, where Yae is the descendant of the Kitsune Saigu. So why don't we talk about the first possibility? If Yae is in fact the ancestor of the Kitsune Saigu, then that would mean that it's possible for her to be the previous Archon. But there are two issues with this. One is that if she was indeed already the Electro God, and is the senior of the Kitsune Saigu, why is it the case then that the Kitsune Saigu is the Kitsune Goddess, and Yae isn't, when she already would have been a god, a Kitsune, as well as the Kitsune Saigu Senior? And if she was the senior, then how come she is unaware of the cleansing that needs to be done in the roots of the Sakura tree? Nor do any of the current Shrine Maidens know about it. The fact that she doesn't show up nor help in the cleansing when the original Kitsune Goddess, who was also the head of the shrine before, tasked herself to do it, it's probably because Yae Miko wasn't alive to witness it being done or having to even learn about it. So that doesn't work. What's more likely is that the Kitsune Saigu is Yae's ancestor, and if that is the case instead, then it is impossible for Yae to be the Electro Archon in the first place, since during the Kitsune Saigu's existence, Baal was already the Electro Archon at the time. So, in the first case, it's unlikely for Yae to have even existed, and in the second, it's impossible for her to have been the Archon. So, who is Yae Miko? What role does she possess, and why is her design the way it is? Well, to answer that, you just have to look at her name. Yae meaning multi-layered, referring to her Kitsune heritage as well as her ancestry to the Kitsune Saigu, and Miko literally meaning Shrine Maiden, and that's exactly why her scheme is a red and white robe. If you search for Shrine Maiden in Google Images, it literally is just pages full of Shrine Maidens dressed in red and white, and the occasional purple thrown in there. And what do you know, just like her clothes, red and white with a little bit of purple accents. And what about her halo? Well, Shrine Maidens have been known to have wreaths or headdresses of flowers at times, typically made with sakura. And what do you know? The symbol on the halo of Yae Miko is not her mentor like Kannon would have, but rather the same symbol on her chest, the symbol of a cherry blossom. So that's pretty much what I have for you today. But I know it leaves us with a lot of questions like what happened to the previous Electro Archon? Why is Baal the way she is? Who is that statue about? And what is up with that fox statue at the port where you first landed in Inazuma? Well, that's why I'm going to have a follow-up second video, talking more on Baal and the mystery of the previous Electro Archon. So if you want to see part 2, then click subscribe. I hope you guys liked the video, and if you did, like it and comment down below what you think about it. I've been trying to break 8,000 subscribers for a while now, and I'm almost there. So if you guys want to help me with that, subscribe and I'll be very grateful. It is free after all. And lastly, I want to thank my patron for still supporting me, and you can support me further too by subscribing to me in Patreon. Links are in the description. But that's it from me. Ad Astra, Abyssosque.